Hey, this is Kevin Dees, the creator of TypeRocket, and I want to show you some of the things that TypeRocket can do to make your workflow more effective and really just help save you time so you can focus on the things that matter most, like user experience when you're building a theme or a website in general with WordPress. So one of the first things you can do with TypeRocket is build really cool post types with custom icons. If I update this, we get custom messages. If you're used to making custom post types, whenever you create them, the messaging throughout WordPress isn't necessarily configured in a way that makes sense and logical. So we take care of some of that for you. And then also you can have these like custom fields. So like insert image, image field, an editor field that isn't the WP editor, which is pretty cool. So you can have this within drag and drop boxes. You know, the WP editor isn't necessarily best suited for being moved around the screen, so we have that. Meta boxes, there's even this SEO plugin that you can use for just some advanced SEO goodness, such as your basic Google result. And as I type, notice down here, this will change. So it does its best to kind of give you an example of what it might look like in Google. And then I could make it a little bit, here we go, the creator of TypeRocket. Okay, so you can kind of see how this works out. Okay. So the next thing we can do here is check out this department area. So here I've added a custom taxonomy, which is pretty neat. If I walk over to the department's taxonomy over here, we'll notice that we have a custom field called goal. And if I go and edit this taxonomy, we'll see the development team, their goal is to make the web awesome. That's pretty cool. So we have custom fields there. And then we also can put custom fields in user profiles. So if I go over to my profile and I scroll down here to the bottom, we'll see that I've added a job title for this specific user and an image. Now we also have the gravatar image, but this is just to show you you can have an image field within the profile. And you can have custom fields anywhere. I'm really just kind of walking through some. You can put custom fields on the front end. You can put them on the dashboard. You can put them on pages, which we'll look at in a little while. You can put them in comments. Anywhere that you want to, you can put fields onto that area very easily, really with just like 1 or 2 lines of code. And then it automatically gets attached to the right place in the database without you even trying to do anything. So that's kind of nice. We also have here theme options in TypeRocket, and you can configure this any way you like. We even have this like cool little search feature. So I can go over here and click sample page, and then that'll set the terms page to the sample page. If I go over to the sample page, we'll see here that TypeRocket comes with this cool little page builder that lets you build your web pages sort of like PowerPoint. And you can configure these again with almost no code. This component here was 2 lines of code, or no, it's more like 4 lines of code because we had to add the title. Okay, but if you didn't want to use the page builder, you can always use your standard editor. And when this is toggled, everything works great. You don't even have to use this. You can turn this plugin off. You can turn and configure TypeRocket however you like. So if I update this page here and I view it, we'll see on the front end how TypeRocket kind of chooses to display these things. So that's the page builder, and we can jump into some of this later on, and I'll show you code here in a little bit. Let's see, what else do I have on my list? There's a lot here to cover. So we have our development tools. For example, TypeRocket comes with a list of icons that you can use within the menu system. So we've got quite a few here, looks like about 200 or so. So that's nice to have more options. And then, yeah, I think what I'll do is I'll stop here and then kind of show you how some of the things that I've just showed you work. And then we'll jump into the more like really developer heavy stuff. Okay. So let's jump over to our theme. And this is TypeRocket installed within the 2017 theme. So if I jump over to the functions.php file, we'll see here that creating a post type is as easy as just writing this one line of code, and then I can set the icon, set placeholder text when I create it. I can make sure that the specific post type, if you noticed on the post type for the person, there wasn't the WP editor in that post type. And so just setting the supports value, this is a WordPress configuration. This isn't something fancy that we made up. Where everything that TypeRocket does, it works within WordPress. So as WordPress upgrades, nothing really breaks. We're not hacking anything here. We're just giving WordPress a little bit easier interface to work with using object-oriented patterns. So here we're just using the title field. We create a meta box and we apply that to the team. So that's pretty simple and straightforward. You also have the custom taxonomy in the field. So I just create the custom taxonomy of department, apply it to the team, and then set the main form. And here's our 2 lines of code to add the text field to that taxonomy. One thing to note whenever you're building out custom taxonomies and adding custom fields, and only really when you add a custom field do you need to do this, which is under the TypeRocket app folder. We have this thing called controllers and models, and you can configure all of this. Again, not necessary for a lot of things. This is getting more advanced, but just to keep things simple, for this example, I went ahead and had some demonstration here, but for custom fields, whenever you build custom fields for most things, you don't have to build these controllers and things, but because taxonomies in the database of WordPress are slightly different and more unique per item, we have to basically create these controllers and models. So here my department model exists, and you can see it's really not a lot of code. And there's actually command line tools that we have to help you build this. And then also the controller here. So again, not a lot going on. We just kind of need these so we can tell the system where and how to save things. But you really don't need that for most of what you do. And again, like I said, we'll cover that in future videos, but this is more of a demonstration to show you what all we can do. Here we have our meta box details. So before we registered the team details up on line 19 here. And then as we come down, we're actually filling out that meta box with that job title that we had seen before. So I'll flip back there just so we can see what I'm talking about. So we can kind of keep context here. So here's that team meta box with team details and our custom field for developer. Now, one of the neat things that TypeRocket does, if I comment this out, I bet you're wondering how that got wired up. So if I comment that code out and refresh this page, you'll see that there's nothing there. So what I actually need to do is go in here to TypeRocket configuration. So TypeRocket and then app, and I can turn on this thing called Debug Mode. And this will give you basically tools for development. So you'll note that everything looks very clean here. But if I refresh the page with Debug Mode on, you will see that we now have these debug little pieces here. And this is code that you can copy and paste into your WordPress loop for that specific post type to then pretty much you can use that to put that custom field right into your loop and display it in your theme. So when you have debug mode on and you created a meta box, TypeRocket actually tells you what function to create to populate that meta box. So then you're not having to go back and forth between the documentation. Really, you just have to remember a few select things, and then TypeRocket kind of helps you along the way. So I'm going to go back to the editor here, and so we've turned on debug mode. We can kind of see some of the neat things that happen there. If I go back to my functions file in my template, I'm just going to comment this back in line so we can have that back. We'll see here that we also have this team post type from before, the variable that we set the object to. And then we're just setting the title form. Now the title form, there's different forms that the team post type can have. So if I go here and I say form, you'll see that I have the title form, the bottom form, the editor form, and the top form. And those are really just the places that you can put custom form fields in different sections of WordPress. So for example, if you wanted your custom field to appear before the title, you could use top. So I'll just do that now so you can kind of see what we're doing here. I'm just going to echo out some text. This doesn't have to be anything specific. And then if I save that, that's going to put this top of page text, and I'll put this in H1 tags so we can kind of really get a good look at this. So here's our title form that's just below the title, where we had our image and our editor field. And then over here at the top of the form. So if I go back here, we really give you a lot of control over what you do. So those are just where you can hook into where the form is for the WordPress submission process. That's why it's labeled form. So that's what those are, and you have plenty of options there. One of the things to note here is that when we're creating these forms, TypeRocket actually automatically detects the context of that form. So as you're creating custom fields and forms, you don't have to specify anything. The form will automatically know how to save the data for you. So you're not creating any saving functionality. You're simply adding form fields, and then TypeRocket takes care of all of that for you. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, that doesn't sound very secure. So the point being, yes, that's not the most secure way of doing it. However, a lot of sites only really have one user, typically an administrator and maybe one other user. So we don't really need to go too far with the security of this. But if this was a multiple user site, yes, we definitely need to be more secure. And I can look at and share with you later on, and we will in other videos, how to actually lock down these custom fields in a more appropriate way. But for most sites, it's really not necessary to do that. So this can work just fine just by adding these fields. Now you'll note here I'm setting the editor field to post content, and then I have that editor field, and then I set the label to about person. But this text here might seem a little odd to you, and that's because what we're doing for this specific field is we're telling WordPress that if this field matches a field in the WP Posts WordPress database, then I want to save this field to that area. So what I call that is a built-in field of WordPress. So essentially I'm saving the editor content from the editor here into the WordPress WP Posts table. So if I go to WP Posts, we'll see here that this says post content. And so that's how I'm saving that data right into there. Okay. So that's how you wire it up. And you'll actually see in the admin, we add this little table icon here. So you can see different information about your specific fields and how they're connected to WordPress. So if you see the little table, it means that it's hooked into the WordPress tables and not being saved to metadata, which is how all these custom post type fields are being saved. Now there's a lot more fields that we can work with here. For example, if I wanted to, I could do a form, and then I could add a repeater. Repeaters are pretty cool, so I'll show you that as a demonstration here. Just going to call this repeater. And then what you can do is you can set your fields for your repeater. And then I'm just going to have an array here. And then I'm just going to start adding some custom fields. So let's do a text field. And then we'll say, we'll just do test here. And then maybe I want another field. And I'll have this one be a gallery. Or we'll look at gallery in a second. So I'll do this as items, right? And then items. Okay. So I just need to echo this field out so it'll appear on the page. And now I'll have a repeater field within the WordPress admin. So if I refresh this page, we'll see here's my repeater, and I can add these different fields. I can insert items, item 2, to. I can move them around. I can delete them. I can contract these repeaters. I can move these around as well. And then I can also, just as a further note, I can set the title. Where is it? Actually, it's called headline. Yep, set headline. And then I can say this is a test item. And when I do that, it's going to add a title up above these so I can kind of see what these are supposed to be. So if I refresh the page, and I haven't saved any, so they'll go away. If I refresh the page here, we'll see this says test item. I can add these, contract them, drag them around. Looks quite nice. And then if I want to, first and last, I can actually flip these and they'll flip around. Pretty cool. So that's how easy it is to create a repeater field. And then, so yeah, I'm just going to keep moving through here. We have a WordPress hook that we created called TR user profile. And this is what allows us to add custom fields to the profile. So as we had seen before, we have a text field and an image field for the profile. And if I go to that specific user and scroll to the bottom here, we have the job title and we have the photo field. And you'll see we even have our debug information as well. So that's pretty nice. And then we have this thing called a custom resource. So when you need to move beyond what WordPress offers out of the box and move into more custom application development, you need a way to create your own tables in the database, manipulate those tables, and work with them. And this is where TypeRocket gets very powerful. We give you the ability to do MVC style development within the WordPress admin. And you can even do that on the front end of your site and build a Laravel-esque type site using custom routes, controllers, and models in an ORM kind of style. That's really quite powerful for working with WordPress. So I want to cover that here very shortly, but I just remembered I have one other thing to show you, which is the page builder. So the page builder that we had seen before is here. It's the sample page. And again, this is like a PowerPoint style kind of development process for building the page. So for example, if I want to have my gallery at the top, then the code, then actually let's do this text and then the code. So that kind of flows nicely. And I update this, we'll see that again, we have examples of TypeRocket. Here's a little gallery, but you might be wondering, how do we create that? So what we do is this kind of a twofold step here, is within my page template, I went and added this little bit of code here, and this is all documented in the TypeRocket documentation. So I'm basically saying if we're using the builder, then use the builder components, okay? And then if not, then I'm just going to do my standard loop here. So again, what this would look like is if I edit this page, switch back to the standard editor, update the page, view that page, here we just have the standard content. So you can see we can build more modular designs if we wanted to. But how do we build those components themselves? So to answer that question, we just have to jump over to components and what I call visuals. The component is the piece of code that runs to build the form in the back end for that drag and drop area. So let's just look at the code example here. Here I have code example, and then I'm just echoing out a form called text area, and that's pretty much all we have to do for that specific component on the back end. So if I go over to edit this page, go to builder, and then click on the code example, we'll see code example, which is being pulled from the H1. And then we have the code text area field. So that's this. So that's all we have to do to build a component. It's that easy. You just have to find the right folder and drop a file in there. Nothing else to do. And then for the display of it, we simply take our data, and the field was called code, so it's going to be code in this array. data object. I'm going to escape the HTML and then print that out to my HTML code. So just to kind of show you what's going on here, I'm just going to add let's add an H1 tag up here. So there's my code example. And then if I go over to the sample page here, edit the page, switch back to page builder, update that, view the page, we'll now see that I have example code at the top here. So that's pretty powerful. This is one of the fun things that I got to build when working on TypeRocket. We found that we had this thing called matrix fields, which is kind of taking the idea from Craft there, Craft CMS, awesome CMS to use, especially if your client restrictions don't allow for open source framework. Craft CMS is a really good one to use. But yeah, so that's kind of how you can create components for the builder itself. And then the last part is, if I edit this, you'll note that these thumbnails exist. Now, the thumbnails simply get pulled from a folder under WordPress, Assets, Components, and then it's the Builder section. And then each of these images get pulled in as like our template. So the process that I like to use for these icons or thumbnails is just to take a screenshot of the code that gets outputted in the design and the design side, and then I use that to kind of represent what those things are. But you really aren't limited to that. You could use almost like a wireframe looking design there, and you can have as many of these as you want. So it's really not that difficult to implement. Okay, so let's see. So all of these are TypeRocket plugins. So you had the SEO plugin, which we briefly looked at. You've got theme options, which we looked at very briefly, this page builder and the development plugin. So all that code exists in here, and you can disable and enable those in the TypeRocket configuration. So under app here, I have all these plugins enabled. If I didn't want any of those, I could just delete them straight away from the design. So if I do that, I just want to go over and let's say I don't want any of these, but I want to keep the page builder. So I'll comment those out in the config, refresh the page, and then here, well, there we go. Just got to refresh the page. Here we see we don't have theme options anymore. And then if I go over to a post, we don't have SEO. And if you were wondering, the SEO plugin gets enabled for any public post type. So any post type that's public, you're going to get this search engine optimization box. Again, you can do different things for social, like Facebook, Pinterest, and Google+, Twitter cards, and some advanced things like canonical, redirecting, setting the robots, that kind of stuff. Okay, so with all that being said, let's get into the really kind of deeper code. Okay, so these resources, this ticket thing, what is this? Well, I'm going to jump over here and just go ahead and preview this. So this is tickets. Now this looks like a WordPress post type, but it is not. Here we have the ticket price, the ID of that ticket, and the name of that ticket. I can view this ticket and see that it's a gold ticket for $20. I can go back to tickets here. I can edit this ticket. It's a gold ticket. I have it for $20, so that's good. And I can even add a new ticket. And if I want to add one here, let's say we want the heart. Let's say we want the heart ticket, right? And then we want that to be $1,000. Okay, I'm going to add that here, and we'll see we now have a heart ticket for $1,000. I can then search these. I can say anything with H heart in it. Search those, and here I'll have my heart tickets. I can remove that search and search again. We can refresh that. I can sort these by ID. I can even delete the heart ticket that I just created. And we'll say ticket deleted. So there's a lot you can really do here. But if this isn't a post type, how did we create this? So that's again where this custom resource comes into play. Now, from the command line in TypeRocket, you can do a few things. So here you'll see that I used the Galaxy command earlier to create the department controller and model. So here I've created a model and I've created a controller, and that Galaxy command lives within the TypeRocket folder itself. So here it's just a PHP command line tool using the Symfony console package. And I can kind of look at this real quick. So PHP Galaxy, and if I run this command, it'll give me the list of options that are available for working with the Galaxy command. So here we see we have the list of commands. We can generate a seed for the config. We can create a new command. We can create a new controller. We can create middleware, which I'm not really going to cover today. We can make a new model. We can use TypeRocket as root, and we can use TypeRocket for templating, which are more advanced features, which again I'm not going to be able to cover today. We just don't have the time really in this example. So again, we were talking about those tickets. So I used the Galaxy command to create a model, and then I passed the -c, which basically says create a controller and a model, and then use the base controller and model templates for creating the ticket. Okay, so if you're not familiar with MVC, hang on tight, and I feel like you'll probably get it as we walk through. So under TypeRocket, I'm going to go to this app folder, and this is where all of our controllers and models are set up. Now, models represent our database and how it's represented in the system. So it's just a way to access our database information for tickets using PHP and not having to do SQL for that. Okay, so then if I jump over to SQL, we'll see we have this WP tickets, and I've set up this table to have an ID, a name, and a price. Okay, and if I go over to my content here, we'll see that I have gold and diamond in the database. So our model is wired up to work with this specific tickets table. So if I go back over to the code, our model is what lets us interact with that table. In the controller section, if I jump over the controller's ticket, or the ticket controller, I'm able to work with the different views within the admin here. So the index view is this tickets area here. The add page, I'm going to create a form, and it's going to be for tickets, and it's going to be to create them, and I'm going to pass that form to the ticket add view, which if I click add here, that's this view. And then if I go over to resources, pages, tickets, add, I'll have my form for that. So here, again, I can have any type of form I want. And then within that controller of ticket, if I want to, when I click the add button here, it's going to go over to the create method on the ticket controller, and then I'm going to load up a new ticket from that model. Okay, so I have my ticket model, and then I just set the name and the price from the fields that were submitted in the request, and you can sanitize this as much as you like if you want to. The key is to really sanitize it on the output. But here I save the ticket, and then I flash the response ticket created, and then I'm going to redirect back to the index page. So that's how you can create a ticket. The edit page would be similar as we saw before. Here I have the edit page being generated. The only difference in the form is I'm passing over the ID here. And that ID comes from, if I go to tickets and edit the ticket, you'll see I have this route ID, and that's what's passed here. So if the ID is created, then I just can tell the form that I want this form to be attached to the ticket in the database where the ID is 1. So that would be the gold here. Whoops. That would be the gold here. Okay. And then updating, very similar to how we created, except this time I'm going to flash a different message. It's going to say updated, and then I'm going to redirect you right back to the same page as before. So I'm going to go to the ticket edit page. When we look at the ticket, we just do this show piece here. So if I go over to show, we can see here I just put some HTML into the page, and then I have my ticket object that was passed over. So if I go back to the ticket controller, we'll see I'm passing this ticket that got injected over into that view, and then it's on the page. And then destroying, I can find that ticket, or if it doesn't exist, just kind of in the page. If it does exist, then I'm going to delete it, and then I'm going to flash a response of ticket deleted and redirect to the index page. Now, you may have noticed that when I click delete here, the page doesn't actually load and it says ticket deleted. Okay, so one of the cool things that TypeRocket does is it knows whether or not you're doing an AJAX request, and based on that, the response is different. So for example, instead of redirecting to the page, if TypeRocket detects that this is an AJAX request, it actually sends over JSON to some other TypeRocket things in the JavaScript side that allow us to post different flash messages, which again, I'm not going to really cover some of that today, but you can control all of that. So that's really custom resources inside of TypeRocket. But what about custom routes? So custom routes are kind of cool. Here I have a routes file inside of the TypeRocket folder. If I open that up, here you can see I have a custom route, and I want the hello path on a GET request to say hi there. So if I go back over to my site here and I go to the hello path, it'll say hi there. And if I wanted that to be using, for example, the WordPress design, I can just do get header and get footer. If I refresh this page, we'll see that it says hi there. So now I can have my own custom path with any type of information I want. So one of the things that you can do here, if you didn't want to do all this within the routes file, is you could return what's called a view. So I'm going to return a view, and this is going to be the pages, and it's going to be hello. Okay, and then under my resources, this is where I would create views. So I'm going to go here, create a directory. I'll call it views. I'm going to create a PHP file. Oh, actually, I need a new folder called pages. And then inside of that, I'm going to create our hello file. So again, in our routes, we're basically saying go look for a view. So under views, go to pages, so pages, and then .hello. So then I'm going to look for hello. So if I go to hello here, I can then echo out, and this is a view, so this is HTML, hi there, and then I'll say, let's do echo date, the year, in, and that'll be 2017. Okay. So then there's my view, and that's going to get returned from this route. But I want to maintain my WordPress design here. So now I can start templating this as if it was just a regular WordPress template file. Get header. Get footer. And now I have this clean template file that I can use instead of working within the route. Whoops. So what I messed up here was you have to return the view itself. So if I return this view to the routing system, then it will load my view. And here we see, hi there in 2017. So that's really all I have to show you about TypeRocket right now. Obviously, there's a lot more you can do. You can create your own console commands. You can create your own front-end forms. But really, that's just a big overview of all that you can kind of do with TypeRocket to get started. I wanted really to cover just sort of the practical use cases of what TypeRocket might be used for. So I hope this has encouraged you to kind of look deeper into TypeRocket as getting more of a broad overview of what it can do, because ultimately I want this tool to help empower you so you can create more amazing designs. So you can focus on what's most important, which is like the user experience and really building the relationship with a client so that they aren't overwhelmed when managing their site. Too many times it's really easy to jump in and build a site using a lot of plugins, but when the client lands on the screen and they go to this plugin section, obviously you don't want a whole lot going on here. If you're using custom post types UI, or really any plugin for custom post types or custom fields, it can really get overwhelming to the client, and they might go and click around and maybe mess with something you don't want. So then you have to deal with roles and permissions. So the idea behind TypeRocket is that we can eliminate that side of things for the client, make that client experience really good. But also, because everything lives in code, you can version everything and it's easier to deploy and maintain. So again, thank you so much for sticking with me all the way up to this point if you have, and checking out TypeRocket. I really hope you enjoy it and it can be beneficial to you. Thanks.